Hello everyone and welcome to Toon Rooms, the show that goes over shows both old and new to give you guys the answers to questions you've always asked. And today I'm going to be going over the many bits of symbolism scattered throughout the Steven Universe episode, Change Your Mind, which is otherwise known as Battle of Heart and Mind. After having nearly a month to think deeply about this episode, I think I'm finally ready to share what my interpretation of some of the scenes are. And as always, you're welcome to share your own interpretations down below in the comments section. And this should go without saying, but today's video contains spoilers from the most recent episode of Steven Universe, Change Your Mind, otherwise known as Battle of Heart and Mind. If you haven't yet seen this episode and wish to avoid spoilers, now's your time to click off the video and come back once you've actually seen the episode. Now with that out of the way, it's time to get on to the rest of the video. Now the first bit we're going to go over is less about symbolism and it's a bit more literal than it is anything else. However, I am going to cover it because I do think it's something that's important to discuss. Right when the episode starts out, we're greeted by Blue Diamond entering and scolding Steven for releasing his pets and allowing them to go wild as a distraction, and they're now chasing the pearls up and down the halls. It's later revealed that this is only a dream in a flashback sequence, and that this was something that Pink Diamond had originally done and been scolded for. Once Steven is actually awake, Blue Diamond comes in, this time for real, to scold Steven about the events that took place in the episode Together Alone. Steven points out the situation is like deja vu, or deja blue as he so aptly calls it. She then tells Steven that he and Connie are not allowed to leave until he apologizes for fusing into Stefani at the ball. Steven tells her that he isn't going to apologize for fusing since he isn't actually sorry for doing it because it isn't wrong. Blue uses her aura to make him cry, and that's when Steven has the realization of the full situation at hand. The relationship that Blue, Yellow, White, and Pink had wasn't a healthy one. Parallels between the crystal gems and the diamonds have been made in multiple places at this point, but the biggest place it can be seen is in the episode Familiar during the song sequence. Steven even further calls upon this and says that he has a loving family with the crystal gems and that the relationship that Pink Diamond had with the diamonds was unhealthy and wasn't normal. They scolded her and made her believe that expressing herself and being different from them was wrong. They made her believe that she deserved being scolded and that she deserved being locked in that room because she was wrong and she was making everybody else miserable. Steven then asks how many times Blue has made her cry, and she insists that she didn't before realizing that she actually did. A lot of times with toxic familial relationships like this, the parental figures don't realize that what they're doing is wrong. They think that what they're doing is what's best for their child and that they're protecting them and that it's tough love, but it isn't. They think that their child is crying because they're just as upset at themselves as the parent is, but not because their actions are hurting their child, which is what the situation usually is. And this is why Blue Diamond's aura ability is so interesting. Yes, the ability makes people sad, and yes, it makes them cry. But they aren't crying because they're upset with their own actions. They're crying because of Blue's actions and Blue's actions alone. And personally, to me, as small as this detail is, being a victim of people with Blue's behavior, it really hit home. And in Steven's case, he was lucky. Blue realized that her actions were wrong and toxic so that she could stop them. It doesn't mean that she should or can be forgiven for the pain that she's caused, it just means that she can cease doing it and stop causing even more pain. A lot of times like this, people remain delusional and believe that their actions are justified and correct, and it ends in something akin to what happened with Pink Diamond. In a way, I guess you could say that Blue never did notice, since as a result, her actions did end up making her lose Pink in the end. She left them behind because of how they treated her, and she never did come back. Her son came back instead, and she nearly pushed him away in the same way that she did his mother. We can also get a glimpse of this attitude throughout the Change Your Mind arc, as Blue and Yellow refuse to treat Steven how he wants to be treated and refuse to recognize him for who he was. They misgendered him and used female pronouns for him, calling him by the name Pink Diamond despite him correcting them with his real name multiple times, and called his identity as Steven silly multiple times. A lot of people have pointed out that this could also be symbolic of a family not accepting another family member who is trans, and I think that the parallels are clear to this situation with the constant and intentional dead naming and misgendering of Steven by the Diamonds. While canonically Steven isn't Rose or even a reincarnation of Rose, the symbolism is still there. Skip forward a bit and we're almost at the biggest and most touching symbolism that this episode had. After Steven's gem is removed by White Diamond and Steven's body is discarded, we get a scene where White Diamond is attempting to bleach Pink Steven once he's defiant of her and refuses to adhere to how she wants him to look and act. Pink Steven continues to deflect her attacks with no issue until White Diamond uses the gaze of everyone who has been bleached in attempts to bring him down. Pink Steven also deflects that attack, continuing on his walk towards his other half. The thing that's interesting about this scene is what she says beforehand, however. Before she attacks Pink Steven, she says, "I only want you to be yourself." If you can't do that, I'll do it for you. The interesting thing about this scene is that everyone who the light is coming from has seen and expected Steven to be something different and like his mom at some point during the show. Except for Connie, and it's why Connie is the only one in this scene who doesn't have a light coming from her. At least in a symbolic sense, I know that gems in a lore perspective would be the only ones affected. As much as the gems are accepting of Steven and his identity now, if you remember at one time they all expected him to be Rose, or at least somewhat like Rose. They didn't know what to make of him or what he was, and this was something that almost caused him to change in the past because he so desperately wanted them to like him. It's something that caused him to be self-conscious and contributed to his self-identity issues. Yet despite all of that, he still persevered. He still deflected the expectations that they unknowingly pushed upon him, and he remained himself. The only one who never had any expectations of him and knew all along who he was Connie. And that's what this scene is meant to represent. It's supposed to represent that despite all of the pressure he had on him to be like somebody else, he never caved in and he always remained who he was. And with that, we're finally on to the biggest scene of this episode, and I'm sure the scene that you all came to this video for. And oh boy, let's pull out all the tissues because the meaning behind this one has touched a pretty large portion of the fan base with its message. Simply put, this scene is symbolic of self-love and acceptance. When human Steven is separated from his gem half, otherwise known as Pink Steven, this is a moment of truth for him. When the gem reforms as himself instead of Pink Diamond or Rose, this is the moment that he has been most afraid of and the moment that this entire series has been building to. It's the moment of truth. Is Steven just some new identity for Pink Diamond to hide behind like she did with Rose, or is he actually his own person? It's something Steven has been fearing the answer of for the entirety of the series, and the fear has only been growing more and more as time passes. And that's why when he sees that the gem reforms as another version of himself and not as Pink Diamond or Rose Quartz, he begins to cry. All of this weight is suddenly lifted off his shoulders in the moment of self-realization. He isn't his mother. His mother's past identity holds no bearings over the person he is now, and it never has. It doesn't dictate who he is unless he allows it to. And as meme-worthy as the whole she's gone portion of this scene is, it's rather heartbreaking if you think about it. Steven is tired of being compared to his mother. He's frustrated. He's confused. He's angry. He's also very upset that people just can't accept him for who he is, and they instead keep holding him to the expectations of someone he never was in the first place. Him screaming that Pink Diamond is gone at White Diamond is the reaction of someone who is sick and tired of repeating themselves, only having to explain over and over again that they aren't who they think or want them to be. This is Pink Steven voicing Steven's anger at the situation and showing that he's done having people compare him to his mother. And then we come to the next scene, which had the most powerful symbolism of the episode. The infamous scene where Steven Universe went from 24 frames per second to 60 frames per second because of the glorious James Baxter, the scene where Steven becomes whole again. Not only is this scene animated beautifully and is very emotional, but it also is meant to signify Steven's self-acceptance. Both his gem half and his human half need to accept each other to become a balanced and happy fusion. Fusion is representative of relationships, and so human Steven and Pink Steven are two halves of Steven himself. Steven is the literal fusion and the manifestation of the relationship with his human and his gem side. He can't have one without the other, and so to reject one of these sides of himself would be impossible and make an unbalanced being. This scene symbolizes him finally accepting who he is, and both sides of himself joining together stronger than ever. Now that Steven is confident and has seen that he isn't his mother but is his own person, he can confidently accept his gem half as a part of him. Not as a part of Rose, but as a part of Steven. And this is why he has a moment of realization after fusing and says, "I've always been me." Because he always has been Steven. He hasn't been half of Rose, not half of Pink Diamond either. And now he and everyone else finally know it. On that note though, I did want to take the time to clarify things. A lot of people are confused at this scene and saying that this is Rose showing Steven that she loves him through the actions of Pink Steven. And this really isn't the case. I get how people could understand this to be the case, but the entire point of this scene was to show how Steven has done all of this on his own. None of it was his mother's doing because she doesn't exist anymore. She never had an influence over his accomplishments or his personality. That's what Change Your Mind signifies, because it's Steven changing the Diamond's minds that he isn't Pink Diamond, amongst other things. A lot of people also took the scene with Rose back in Lion 3 straight to video literally when she said that she was going to become half of Steven. Steven also began to take this seriously over time, but Rose literally meant it in a metaphorical sense. Rose gave up her existence to become part of Steven, and as hard as a pill as that is and was to swallow, she no longer exists. Think of it as her actually being dead despite her physical gemstone being embedded within Steven's body. And if you've seen my Gems Are AI theory video, then think of it as Pink Diamond's data being permanently erased from her gemstone to make room for a clean data entry, aka Steven. I mean, there was so much confusion over the logistics of this scene that Joe Johnston, who is a storyboarder and supervising director on Steven Universe, answered questions on the topic over on his Tumblr. And I'll put some of the answers regarding this topic on screen, but it was there that he confirmed that even if Steven died, Rose wouldn't come back. It's just as cut and dry as that. She's gone forever, and she has been since the start of Steven's existence. Her line in Lion 3 was just her way of telling Steven that she loved him because she knew that she would never get to tell him that in person. And like Steven, we as fans read into it a bit too much. But of course, everything else besides that is up to interpretation. Do you agree or disagree with how I interpret some of the scenes I've mentioned? Are there more symbolic scenes you noticed in this episode that I didn't mention? Make sure to let me know in the comments section down below. As always, there will be a poll regarding this video over on the community tab of my channel. And if you like this video, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe to see more content from me. And I will see you all in the next video. Have an amazing day, everyone.
When I see the way you act, wondering when I